Food 3340, Intermediate Meal Management, Claude Sawyer. Dinner theme, America's Dinner, meat and potatoes. This is a picture of me with my gloves, hat, apron, and no-slip shoes. First, I wash my hands, making sure I get between the fingers and under the nails. And make sure I rinse off very well. After I rinse off, dry my hands using a paper towel, and using the paper towel, I shut off the water. After that, I put on a fresh pair of gloves. It's time to get a paper towel and wipe down my counters and my stove with my cleaning supplies. My first step is going to be cleaning my fruit. I have 2 strainers, and I'm going to put strawberries in one and blueberries in the other. Next, I'm going to spray the fruit with a fruit cleaner. Now what this does, it goes on the fruit and it bubbles up and it cleans the fruit, gets all the dirt and the chemicals to come up off of the fruit. Next, I'm going to thoroughly rinse off the fruit. Once the fruit's been thoroughly cleaned, I put the fruit in separate containers. Now I'm going to put the fruit up in the refrigerator till later. Now I'm ready to prep the meat. So I'm cutting the meat on a red cutting board, which red cutting board is for red meat. And I'm cutting the meat into bite-sized pieces. Now, I'm going to put the meat in a gallon bag. Now it's time to season the meat. I'm going to use a half teaspoon of pepper, and a half teaspoon of salt. Next, I'm going to seal the bag, and I'm going to move the meat around in the bag, trying to make sure all the meat is coated with the salt and pepper. Then I'm going to put it away in the refrigerator till later. Now it's time to wash my hands and get a fresh pair of gloves on. Now it's time to get the potatoes ready. So first things first, get a pan, fill it up with water. I'm going to turn it on high so it'll boil. While the water's starting to boil, it's time to wash the potatoes. I want to make sure that I wash the potatoes thoroughly. It's about 9 potatoes, about 2 pounds of weight. I want to make sure that I thoroughly clean them. Now, I'm going to dice 4 garlic cloves. Once the cloves are diced, I'm going to add them to the pot of water on the stove. Then I'm going to cover the top, which will help the water boil faster. Next, I'm going to cut my potatoes into 2-inch chunks. Once I'm done cutting up the potatoes, I'm going to add it to the boiling pot on the stove. After I put my potatoes in the water to boil, I set the timer for 20 minutes. Now it's time to start the green beans. So I fill a saucepan with water and put it on the stove to boil. Then I add a teaspoon of salt and I turn the heat up to boil. Once the water is boiling, I add the green beans. Now I'm going to prepare the toppings for my bruschetta. I start off by dicing 8 Roma tomatoes. I'm using a green cutting board because the green cutting board is for vegetables and fruit. But add that to the bowl. Next, I'm going to dice up some basil. It's 1/3 cup of basil, and I'm going to add that to my bowl. Next, I'm going to mince 2 garlic cloves and add that to the bowl. Now, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and then a tablespoon of balsamic vinegar. And then I'm going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper and a 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt. Then I'm going to mix that around, and I'm going to put that up in the refrigerator till I need it. Now that the potatoes are finished, we're going to strain out the water, and then we're going to add the potatoes and the garlic back into the same pan. Using a masher, I'm going to mash the potatoes down to a smooth consistency. Then I'm going to add a 1/2 cup of sour cream. After that, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter. Next, we're going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper and a 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt. And then I'm going to mix that all together, put the top on, and put it to the side. Now it's time to strain our green beans. I'm going to strain our green beans, and I'm going to put them under the cold tap water to bring down the temperature. And then I'm going to put them to the side to cool down. Now it's time to cook the meat. So we're going to get a saucepan, put on medium-high, and add 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Once it heats up, we're going to get the meat out of the refrigerator, and we're going to add it to the pan. We always want to make sure that every piece of meat is touching the pan so it cooks evenly. Then I'm going to set the timer for 2 minutes. Once that 2 minutes is up, I'm going to flip the meat over, and then I'm going to set the timer for another 2 minutes. Once that meat is done, I'm going to transfer it to a plate. Using the same pan, I'm going to add 2.5 tablespoons of unsalted butter, 4 minced garlic cloves, and then a tablespoon of red pepper flakes. Then I'm going to transfer the meat into a bowl. Once it's in the bowl, I'm going to add my buttery mixture to the top and mix it so I make sure that all the meat is covered. And then I'm going to put it up to the side until it's time to plate. Now it's time for me to get the brioche bread ready for the bruschetta. So I preheat the oven to 400 degrees and start to slice the brioche bread into small slices. Once I'm done slicing the bread, I take a tablespoon of olive oil and put on each piece of bread. After I have applied the olive oil to the bread, I put it into the oven. I set a timer for 10 minutes. Once the bread is done, I take it out and I add 2 tablespoons of mozzarella cheese. Then I put the bread back into the oven to melt the cheese, and I set the timer for 5 minutes. Now it's time to cook the green beans. So get a saucepan and put it on medium-high and add 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Then add 2 garlic cloves, and then I add the green beans. Since we're sauteing them, we want to keep the pan moving, and we want to make sure we're tossing the green beans to make sure we're covering it with garlic and with olive oil. Now I take the bread out, and it's time to add the top of the bruschetta mix to it. Now I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of our bruschetta mix to the top of our crispy bread. And now it's time to plate. I'm going to start off by putting a good portion of green beans on everybody's plate. Then 2 scoops of potatoes. And then we're going to put in 2 scoops of steak. And then we're going to add a piece of bruschetta to each plate. And that's the final plate that we're serving. I'm going to wash my hands again. And then put on some new gloves. And now it's time to get ready for the dessert. I'm going to put down the tart and add a handful of blueberries. Then a slice of strawberry. And then I'm going to add a spoonful of fat-free Cool Whip. Then I'm going to add another slice of strawberry to the top. And finally, I'm going to add a handful of blueberries to each top. And this is the final product for our dessert. Now it's time to clean. So we're going to wash the dishes and add them to the dishwasher. And then clean down the stove and the countertops and anywhere else food may have dropped. All right. I hope you enjoyed the video. I am out.